If you're having a good time listening to these horror stories, we'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to click that like button below the video. In the summer of 2018, I just finished high school. I wanted to have my own place, and I saved money from my job for 2 years to make it happen. My original plan was to rent a small, affordable one-bedroom apartment downtown, right next to my old high school. Some of my friends already lived there, so it seemed like the perfect spot. Living there meant I could stay close to everyone and everything. I could easily walk to the grocery store, nearby parks, and everything else I needed every day. I had saved $10,000, and I didn't owe any money to anyone. My car was completely paid off, and I was really happy. This was one of the best times in my life. So I applied for the apartment on the internet, and when they said I could live there, it made me happy. It felt awesome to have my own place, with my own space and my own walls. But things changed a lot about a week after moving in. Remember I mentioned my friends who already lived there? Well, my good buddies Aaron and Rob lived in the same building, just 2 floors above me. They came over a few times and we hung out a bit, nothing too wild at first. But then things got a little out of hand. They started spending too much time at my place, and after staying over for 2 whole days, I had to ask them to leave politely so I could have some time for myself. I really wanted them to go, but I was trying to be nice about it. My place turned into the hangout spot every day, and I didn't like it much, especially since I'm an introvert. Plus, I had just gotten my own place and I thought I'd have more alone time. Then Aaron told me they got kicked out of their place and needed somewhere to stay for a few weeks. I felt stuck. I didn't want them to be homeless, and they kind of made me feel bad about it. So I told them they could stay for 2 weeks. Well, 2 weeks turned into 4, and then it went on for 2 whole months. I guess you could say I was too nice and cared a lot about my friends. But it turned out they weren't really my friends after all. They were just using me for a place to stay, and they didn't care about what I wanted. Every day they brought random people over, made a lot of noise until 1 a.m., and smoked and drank with a bunch of random people, mostly girls. We even got the police called on us many times. I'm honestly lucky I didn't get kicked out of my apartment. One night, I had enough. I was trying to sleep, and I had already asked them many times to be quiet, but they just ignored me. So, I got really mad and kicked them out of my place. It took me about 20 minutes to get everyone, including Aaron and Rob, to leave. They finally went after I threatened to call the police. I felt relieved, but they left my place in a huge mess. I decided to clean it up in the morning because I was really tired. I woke up super early at around 6 a.m. with a really bad headache. I walked out of my room in just my underwear, rubbing my eyes to wake up. Then out of nowhere, I got a big shock. Aaron and Rob were sitting on my couch. I said, "What are you guys doing here? Get out of my place." "We're not leaving. Just relax," Aaron said. I didn't have the energy to argue, so I quickly grabbed my phone and dialed 911. The police arrived, but of course Aaron and Rob ran away before they got there. They had a spare key I gave them when they first started staying with me, and they still had it. I know, a big mistake on my part. I hoped that would be the end of it, even though deep down I knew it probably wouldn't. I didn't have a way to keep them out, so I did what I thought was best. I put a big blockade in front of the door just in case they tried to come back. By 10:30 p.m. that night, there was no sign of them. I had finally started to forget about them and got lost in a movie I was watching. But then I heard the front door jingle and I couldn't believe it. "Not again. When will you two leave me alone?" I was worried about my safety, so I called the police again and didn't answer the door when Aaron and Rob knocked. "Hey, please let me in, bro. We're sorry and it's really cold outside. We won't mess up again. Just let us stay this one last night, and we'll leave you alone for good." Their apology felt strange and insincere. Something didn't feel right, and I had a bad feeling inside me. I knew it wasn't smart to believe them, so I waited for the police. Luckily, they arrived quickly and arrested both of them. What's disturbing is what the police found with them. They had some drugs, which was kind of normal for them. But the scary part was they had roofie drugs, not just weed. They also had handcuffs, an illegal gun, many knives, a rope for bondage, and a few other things that looked like they could be used for hurting people. I'm really glad I didn't let them in that night. I got a restraining order against them, and my apartment changed the locks to keep me safe. I really hope they weren't planning something bad for me that night, but I don't know. The signs aren't good. They seem like they could be dangerous in the future. There's something seriously wrong there. I'm more of a nerdy person who likes school and sports. Sometimes I used to drink with these guys, but after that night, I promised myself I'd never touch alcohol again. It's left a bad feeling in me ever since.
The story happened 5 years ago, and now I'm 23 as I write this. When I turned 18, I started looking for a new place to live. My relationship with my parents wasn't the best back then. I was a stubborn and arrogant teenager, so we argued a lot, especially with my dad. I really care about both of them, and I know we all had our flaws, but I'm glad we worked things out because nowadays, our family is much better. But for many years, things at home were tough. I admit I made mistakes, but I'm not the only one to blame. None of my friends wanted to leave their parents' homes yet, and that makes sense because they had good relationships with their moms and dads. They all had jobs and were going to college, trying to save money as they went. But for me, it was different. I wanted to leave as soon as I could. Whenever I got caught smoking weed or drinking alcohol, my parents would threaten to kick me out. But each time I packed my stuff and left, they called the police and said I was a runaway. Thankfully, I didn't end up in juvie, but I spent some nights in jail, in a holding cell, as a kind of lesson. I didn't really learn my lesson then, and unfortunately, I had to learn the hard way. I wasn't overconfident, just a bit too sure of myself and quick-tempered. Since I didn't have any friends looking to be roommates, I took a big chance. I checked Craigslist, hoping to find an affordable place to rent, and stumbled upon a small but okay-looking house listed for $550. It almost felt too good to be true. I knew there might be a catch, but I wanted to know all the details, so I got in touch. When I called, the lady didn't answer, so I left a voicemail. Not long after, I got a text telling me to come and see the house in person and talk to her about everything. She wanted me to come that same night, so I went. When I got there, she talked to me about everything, and it all sounded pretty good. I was actually really happy about having a place all to myself. She didn't make me sign any papers or anything like that. She just asked for a small deposit fee, which I managed to gather up. She told me I could move in the next day if I had the deposit money. So I showed up at the house the next morning and met with her to give her the money. After that, she gave me the keys, and I unloaded my truck and left. I had some other stuff to do that day, and I also needed to go back to my parents' place to pick up a few more things. When I got back to the new place, it was about 8:30 p.m. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw the lady's car was still there. It made me feel uneasy and suspicious. When I walked in, I found her in the living room, sitting on my couch, watching TV. I asked her, what are you doing here? I don't mean to be rude. What's happening? She replied, Oh, I'll be staying here for a little while until I find my own place. I stared at her, feeling really confused and surprised. Nowhere in our agreement did she say we'd be living together. I asked her how long she planned to stay, and she said just a few days. I didn't like the idea, but I was so tired and overwhelmed that I agreed and went to my room. I made a big mistake by falling asleep shortly after lying down. I felt uncomfortable with this lady, who was basically a stranger, staying in my new house. But I didn't feel like I had many options. She was around 65 years old, so I figured I could handle things if she did anything strange. I also locked my bedroom door just in case to be safe while I slept. About 30 minutes after I fell asleep, I woke up to some music playing in the living room. I got out of bed and asked her if she could turn it down because I was trying to sleep. But all she did was look at me with a blank expression. She lowered the music a bit but didn't say anything. I managed to fall back asleep, but what I woke up to was the scariest and most disturbing thing that has ever happened to me. There was a knock on my door. At first, it was very gentle. Hello, what do you want? I'm trying to sleep, ma'am. Timmy, wake up, she said. Dinner's almost ready. You don't want to upset Mommy. When she said that, I felt a shiver run down my spine. My name isn't Timmy, and it's not even close to that. I was so shocked that I couldn't say anything. I hoped she would just leave and go away. But less than a minute later, she started banging on the door with both fists, screaming at the same time. I didn't look back at all. At the time, I didn't know, but a few weeks later, I found out something really disturbing. The lady's name was Eileen, and her son had gone missing. They eventually found his body, and Eileen was accused of killing him. There was a lot of evidence that she had poisoned him. They discovered his body buried in the backyard of that rental house. Her son's name was Timmy. I don't know what's wrong with her, but she has some serious mental issues. I'm not sure if she really thought I was her son or not. Maybe she was trying to relive that situation, or maybe she was trying to harm me in some way, but it's hard to say. She might be so mentally ill that she believed I was her son. Talking about this still feels like a strange and scary memory. That lady was really crazy, and I'm completely sure that if I had eaten the food she gave me that night, I'd be dead, just like Timmy. I got home really late after a tough day of school and work. It was 9 o'clock at night, and as soon as I walked into my apartment, I smelled something bad. I went straight to Ryan's room, who was my good friend and roommate back then, to ask if he knew about the smell. I knocked on his door, but he didn't say anything. That was strange because he was usually home and would answer the door when I knocked. So I lightly tapped on his door again and asked, "Hey, are you in there? Are you awake?" But once more, he didn't reply. I really wanted to go inside, but I stopped myself because I wouldn't want someone to do the same to me. A couple hours passed and the smell grew more intense. I blew Ryan's phone up hoping for a response, but he never replied with a single text. I must have called 5 or 6 times, and every single time it went straight to voicemail. This was extremely uncommon for him to do. Before I get into this story any further, I'd just like to add that this really isn't for the faint of heart, and I'm putting a trigger warning for this, so you can't say you weren't warned beforehand. A few more hours passed by and the smell grew even more intense. It was absolutely wretched, and it started to seem like he was coming from Ryan's room. At this point, I didn't care if he was in there or not, and I didn't care what he was doing. I was determined to get to the bottom of the damn smell. I said, "Ryan, if you're inside, I'm coming in." Then I turned the doorknob. The door was locked, so I went to the guest bathroom and found a bobby pin. I used it to open the lock. It took me a while, but I finally managed to unlock the door. When I opened it, I was hit with a horrible smell, much worse than before. It was so bad that it seemed like the smell was leading straight to the closet. I was really scared, but I went over to the closet and opened it. What I saw was incredibly shocking. I couldn't believe my eyes. Inside, there was a bag with an animal leg sticking out of it, and there were maggots everywhere. It had to have been sitting there for weeks. I about threw up on the spot. I didn't know what kind of animal it was at the time, but it seemed to be a dog. I don't care if I seem like a pussy for this either, because that's just not right. So I called the police immediately, and I snitched on my friend, or whatever you want to call it. I explained the whole thing to the dispatcher, and the cops showed up within 10 minutes. They went into the closet, and they found that it indeed was a dog. It was a beaten-to-death pit bull with its head nearly completely decapitated. I couldn't watch them haul the dog out without bursting into a panic. I really love animals, so seeing that poor dog like that was really upsetting. We waited for Ryan to come back for about an hour, but he didn't show up. So the police left and told me to call if he came back, but I didn't want to stay in that apartment any longer. What's crazy is that I haven't talked to him since that day. I blocked him on everything and moved all my stuff out of the apartment the very next day. I even broke my month-to-month lease. I don't know where Ryan is or what happened to him. People in town said he went missing, but I honestly don't care. That person deserves to face the consequences for sure. I'm glad I went into Ryan's room when I did, but what if I hadn't? If I had discovered what he did while he was still there, would he have harmed me too? They issued a warrant for his arrest, I think. I hope they catch him. You never really know someone, do you? He was my friend for a long time, from first grade to senior year. Looking back on everything still surprises me, even now. It's hard to believe that the Ryan I knew could do something like that. He was mentally troubled.